Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom.
Hey, it's our table setting or formal table setting unit, I guess you could say. We're learning what to do if you get invited to a really formal dinner. We spent day one talking about more of the Western customs and how we set the table and why we have so many utensils. We have too many glasses. I know it's hard. Well, today we're going to focus on international customs. I love this. Some of them I'm familiar with. Others I had never heard of before. But it's great stuff to learn because nowadays people are traveling to different countries a lot. And you don't want to insult that country's hosts, especially if you get invited to a dinner. And you don't want to embarrass yourself. So it's really good to learn customs first.
Indeed. And, of course, there are different customs in different countries.
Yeah.
We're not just going to talk about Western customs.
No.
Because, of course, we're in a global village now, and people are dealing with people from countries all over the place. So we will talk about France, yes, a Western country, but we will go to Thailand and India and even Mexico. We'll get to that in a couple of seconds. You know what we need to do? We actually need to read our lesson first. So let's get to it. Let's read it, and then we'll talk about it. France. Do. Use bread appropriately. It should sit on the table to the left of the plate and accompany the entree. Tear bread with your hands instead of using a knife. Do keep your hands on the table. This practice dates back to when it was common to dine with enemies. Don't eat quickly. French people consider it important to slow down and appreciate the many flavors of food. Thailand. Do be ready to share. Thai meals often include many dishes split between everyone at the table. Don't rest your chin in your hand while at the table. This is considered very disrespectful in Thailand. Don't put your fork in your mouth. Only use it to push food onto your spoon. India. Do eat with your right hand. The common custom in India is to tear off pieces of flatbread and scoop up curry with them. Do finish your whole meal and eat at a moderate pace. Wasting food is seen as discourteous. Don't use your left hand to eat. This is considered unhygienic. Mexico. Do wait for the host to say buen provecho before you begin eating. Do let the host pay the bill. Mexican people rarely split the check. Don't worry about being punctual. Guests are usually expected to run up to a half hour late to a dinner invitation at a friend's home.
So let's talk about France first, guys. Let's look at some of the do's here. Use bread appropriately, or the way you should use it. Appropriately just means in a suitable way. First of all, think about France's bread. It's that long bread that's called a baguette. That's actually my favorite bread in the whole world. I love baguettes, and I'm so happy that I can find them here in Taiwan. The first time I lived in Taiwan, there were no baguettes to be found. So it's got a hard crust on the outside, and then inside it's soft and fluffy. And I can eat a whole baguette. You know, I don't even need anything else on it, but if you get butter and some jam on it, it's delicious. So use bread appropriately. They're talking about baguettes. And the French will actually go and buy a fresh loaf every day, a loaf of bread. So it should sit on the table to the left of the plate and accompany the entree. You have to tear the bread with your hands. Don't cut it. That's not cool. You always tear a baguette. I wanted to mention here, too, this is different from the U.S. In the U.S., especially if you're at a restaurant, they're going to serve you bread while you're waiting even for your appetizer. They'll just put a bowl of bread or a plate of bread in front of you with some butter. Don't eat too much of it or you will fill up on bread.
True. Okay, so yes, the French do love their bread. And this might be kind of unusual for people in Taiwan because my impression is You guys don't like to touch your food, okay? If you can, you eat it with utensils, chopsticks, or if you're eating a hamburger, you have it wrapped in paper or something like that. You guys just don't like to touch your food. So, yeah, if you're going to use your hands to tear bread, it might seem a little unusual, but that's how it's done in France. No, you can't tear the bread with a napkin between your fingers and the bread itself. No, you've got to touch the bread directly with your hands. And yes, listen to the sound of the bread as you tear it apart. That is part of the experience. I learned that from the movie Ratatouille, by the way. Well, here in the next part here, we're going to say something else you need to do when you're in France. You need to keep your hands on the table, okay? I guess you're not supposed to put them under the table. Maybe that's because you might be holding a gun or a sword under there, and this practice dates back to when it was common to dine with enemies. So the French had their enemies, but they still enjoyed their food. So yeah, we'll go out and fight the battle during the day, but at night we'll be friends and have dinner together. But we still don't totally trust you. So yeah, we need to see your hands. Put your hands where I can see them. And so this practice, of course, goes back a long way. It dates back to the time when it was common for people to have dinner with the people they hated.
Very different from today. So here's another don't. Don't eat quickly. The French like to have a leisurely meal, whether it's breakfast or lunch or dinner. They don't eat much for breakfast, just so you know, but they consider it really important just to slow down and appreciate the flavors of your food. They really want you to enjoy the food itself, and they consider eating or dining one of the pleasures in life. But sometimes, those of us who are just running around and we're busy, we kind of just stuff food in our face and then try to get on with all our work. That's not what the French do. So they're a little bit more, at ease. They're casual, but they do enjoy eating. They do enjoy food.
That might drive Taiwanese people and Americans crazy if you have a meal with French people. Gee, do they have to take so long? They're taking forever. Don't they realize we got to get back to work and make money? Wow, we've been here for 2 hours eating with these people. What's wrong with them? But yeah, you can't eat quickly if you're having a formal meal in France. Yes, it's important to slow down and appreciate the food. The French, of course, are very proud of their food. So indeed, if you woof it down like Americans do with hamburgers, that would be considered very uncivilized. Now, let's go to Thailand now. Here's what you should do when eating in Thailand. Be ready to share. Which is the case here in Taiwan. You often put the food in the middle of the table and you all share the food. Thai meals often include many dishes split between everyone at the table. So here, if you split something, you divide it. So, of course, people share the food on the table. Americans are used to ordering one meal for one person. I think the Japanese do that as well. But in China and in Thailand, it's very common for people to share the food.
Yeah, they don't like to, have someone hog their dish. So they split their dishes between everyone at the table. That's kind of nice. But we're used to that if we're here in Taiwan. If you split, you can use split in different ways. It just means to separate, right? Or here it just means to share. So sometimes you'll hear maybe a friend say you want to split the bill, which means you'll share the cost of whatever meal you're eating. That can also be called, going Dutch isn't the same. Going Dutch means you pay for your own, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they split their dishes like we do here. But this is one rule I'd never heard of before. Don't rest your chin in your hand while you're at the table. So this is considered very disrespectful in Thailand. You know what? I have to warn people, Thailand has a lot of these rules, whether it's respectful or disrespectful. You should brush up on what the Thai considered respectful and make sure you don't go against those. They've got a lot of those, it would seem. What's the last one, Tom?
We're going to talk about more about Thailand, but these are some things you don't do in Thailand. This is kind of unusual for me because when I was growing up, you always used your fork to put food in your mouth. But here it says, don't put your fork in your mouth. That's weird. How are you supposed to pick up a piece of steak and put it in your mouth if you don't use your fork? But in Thailand, you only use your fork to push food onto your spoon. So it's kind of like a tool for the spoon. If you're eating steak there, you would just simply take a piece of meat with the fork and kind of move it over onto the spoon, and then you can eat the piece of steak. Although I don't think they're going to be eating a lot of steak in Thailand. They'll be having different kinds of stuff that is more like stir-fried. Thai food is kind of similar to Chinese food in that it is cooked over a large fire in a wok and stuff like that.
I'm kind of surprised they have forks and spoons. I have been to Thailand, and I guess I've forgotten, but it seems like they would use chopsticks because their food is very, it's diced up into small pieces, kind of what we're used to here, as Tom said. Now, the next country is India. They have some of my favorite food. The Indian food is very spicy. They use a lot of herbs, spices. Curry's a big deal. It's a big thing in Indian food. I love curry. And here's the first rule. Do eat with your right hand. So this is pretty important. Don't use your left hand. Eat with your right hand. The common custom in India is to tear off pieces of flatbread and scoop up curry with them. That flatbread is also known as naan, N-A-A-N, naan bread. I love naan bread, especially if they burn one side of it. I love burnt bread. But yeah, the flatbread is really delicious. You tear and then you use your right hand to scoop up the curry with the naan bread. I guess for the most part, I have only eaten with friends, so I've never actually eaten a formal dinner in India or even at an Indian restaurant, so I've never seen just using your hands. Have you, Tom? Is this something you're familiar with?
I do eat Indian food with the naan there, but I learned that in Mexico, actually, if you take a tortilla and you eat refried beans and rice and stuff, you will eat in a similar way. So
True.
I just applied what I learned in Mexico to Indian food, and it just happened to be the same method. Okay, but we'll continue talking about the do's and don'ts of Indian food in just a second, but right now we're going to listen to our Chinese teacher.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们昨天谈了一些有关于西方的餐桌的摆设、餐具的摆设，虽然感觉好像很繁复，但是呢还是有秩序、是有逻辑的。那么今天呢，我们就要来看一看各国的餐桌礼仪。例如说呢，第一个我们来看看法国的餐桌礼仪，有几个要做的 do's， 还有一个不要做的don't。 比如说呢，一定要怎么样呢？我们知道法国好像很有名的就是法国面包啊，没有错。第一个 do 一定要很正确适当的 appropriate 使用你的面包。在这个第一个 do 当中，第二句话当中，我们看到 it should sit， 这个面包啊应该要坐在餐桌上的哪里的左边呢？盘子的左边，而且是要跟着主餐Entree 一起来吃哦。在这句话当中还有另外一个动词是 accompany， accompany 就是陪伴的意思。不过第三句话的第一个字要小心，在这里不是眼泪哦，这个字 T-E-A-R 眼泪叫做 tear， 当动词的时候是 tear， 指的是撕的意思，它的三态是 tear tore torn。那么第二个在法国餐桌礼仪上一定要做的就是你要把手放在餐桌上。为什么会这样子呢？因为这种做法，这种 practice 是从某个起点开始的。我们看一下这个片语叫做 day back to。Day back 就是往回走，如果有一个 to 呢，则会加一个起点。这个起点就是 when it was common to dine with enemies， 当时开始跟敌人可以一起吃饭的时候， 大家吃饭的人就要把手放在桌上咯，不然会有一些安全的疑虑。那么在法国绝对不可以做什么呢？绝对不可以吃得很快 Don't eat quickly， 因为法国人会觉得慢慢的吃，然后要欣赏食物的美味，这件事情很重要的。所以在法国这个 don't 的地方，第二句请注意一下动词 consider 后面的受词 it， 受词如何呢？important， 觉得这件事很重要，而 it 是一个虚主词，真主词是从后面的 to slow down 一直到句尾的地方。接下来我们来看一下泰国的状况。泰国有一个一定要做的事，就是泰国跟我们一样有点类似像合菜的概念，所以一定要跟别人 share 分享。那么通常泰国菜会包含很多跟桌边的人一起分食的菜。那么在第二句当中，我们看到 split 到句尾可以左右括号起来，其实它是一个关系子句的简化，在 split 前面省略了that are 或者是 which are。 好，可是在泰国有2个不可以做的事情哦。第一个不能做的就是不能够在餐桌用手撑着下巴，这样子是非常的不尊敬不礼貌的。第二个 don't 就是不可以用叉子把食物送进你的嘴巴，把叉子如果放到嘴巴里面，这是不行的哦，要小心。那叉子到底要用来做什么用啊？我也很好奇。只能够拿来 push food onto your spoon， 把食物推到你的汤匙里面。第3个呢，我们来看一下在印度的状况，有一个一定要特别记住的，一定要用右手来吃饭 eat with your right hand。 而在印度的话呢，用右手通常是会先去把面包撕下来 tear off， 我们又看到撕这个字咯。他们的面包是那种平平的薄面饼 flat bread， 然后用这个面包呢把咖喱舀起来。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're talking about different table manners in different countries. We started out with France. The French love their baguettes, their bread, those long loaves of bread that they actually go and buy every day at the market. The French actually shop in a way that's similar to Taiwanese, where they go to the market to get fresh fruits and vegetables pretty much every day because they want their loaf of bread fresh as well. You might have noticed that if you get some baguette here in Taiwan, if you don't eat it the same day, the next morning it's soft. And you want that hard crust on the outside. So, yeah, we talked about France. You want to keep your hands on the table because then they'll know that you don't have a gun or a knife under the table that you want to hurt them with. And also, you need to eat slowly and enjoy the flavors of the food. Also, if you're eating in France or eating French food with French people, make sure to compliment them on the food. They're very proud of their food.
Absolutely, and they expect you to recognize that. They expect you to recognize that French food is the best in the world. And, of course, we talked about Thailand as well. You need to share the food. The dishes are split between everyone at the table. But don't rest your chin in your hand when you're at the table. It's rude, it's disrespectful. And you can't put your fork in your mouth as well in Thailand. You use it to push food onto your spoon. And before we took our break, we started talking about India, and in India you need to eat with your right hand, and you will tear off pieces of flatbread, which would be the naan, also tortillas in Mexico, and then you use that little piece of bread to scoop up curry with. That's very common, a common way to eat Indian food. Now, here's another do in India, something you should do. Do finish your whole meal and eat at a moderate pace. Don't wolf your food down. Don't go really slow like the French. Somewhere in between. A moderate pace. Pace refers to the rate at which you're moving. Like, are you going to have a fast pace in the marathon, or is it going to be a slow pace?
Right. This is very important. They don't want you to waste food because it's seen as discourteous. If you're discourteous, it just means you're rude or you lack good manners. You don't want to appear discourteous or uncivilized. Tom's been using this phrase, which is great, wolf down your food. That's actually the name of the animal, WOLF. Just means you're really stuffing your face very quickly. Yeah, you don't want to do that. And here's another don't. Don't use your left hand to eat. This is considered unhygienic. If it's unhygienic, it's considered not sanitary, unclean, kind of creepy to them probably. So kind of maybe I have thought about this. I thought, well, I guess I could sit on my left hand so I wouldn't use it because we're just used to using both hands in America especially. Well, here we are too. So you don't want to do anything that's unhygienic. That's a pretty big no-no. Don't use your left hand. And now we're going to move on to Mexico. One of Tom's favorite places in the world.
Although I haven't been there in many, many years, it's probably too dangerous now with the drug lords and stuff like that. But indeed, if you're in Mexico, in Mexico City or whatever, do wait for the host to say buen provecho before you begin eating. That, of course, is a phrase in Spanish. I think provecho means, something that you get, something that comes your way. So it basically means like bon appetit in
It's kind of like
French.
good providence or something.
Something like that,
yeah.
So indeed, of course, in France, you'd say bon appetit before you begin eating. And in Mexico, you would say buen provecho. They mean basically the same thing. And here's something else you should do in Mexico. Let the host pay the bill. If they have invited you to dinner at their home or at a restaurant, don't suggest that you pay the bill or don't suggest splitting the check. Don't say, hey, let's go Dutch. No, that would be an insult to the host. It's up to the host to pay the bill. And don't argue with that. Mexican people rarely split the check like Americans like to do. We love to split the check.
Yeah, just be gracious and accept the meal. Now, here's another don't. Don't worry about being punctual. If you're punctual, you're always on time for any appointment you set or a meeting or just meeting your friends sometimes. So this is a culture that just doesn't really fuss about time. They don't really care. They're very, life is good. Let's take our time. So don't be insulted if you have a dinner and you have Mexican friends come over. They might show up a little late. They don't mean to be rude. That's just kind of their culture.
Right, and it would also probably be considered rude if you show up on time.
Yeah, don't do that.
Because they're expecting everybody to be late, at least a half hour late. So, if you show up right on time, they're going to be going, well, yeah, we did say we're starting our dinner at 7 p.m., and it is 7 p.m. now, but we're not really ready for the guests to start arriving. We're still cooking the food. We haven't really changed into our nice clothes and stuff like that. So, yeah, if you're in Mexico or in other Latin American countries, I believe this custom holds as well. You're supposed to not be so punctual, okay? Here in the final sentence, it says, guests are usually expected to run up to a half hour late to a dinner invitation at a friend's home. So, yeah, that's about the amount of time you need to spend getting to someone's dinner invitation. Again, if they schedule it for 7 o'clock, shoot for around 7:30, 7:40, maybe 7:20, somewhere in there.
Yeah, don't be too late and definitely don't be early. That's terrible. If someone is hosting you and they're cooking dinner at their home, I think the worst thing to do is to come early because they are really trying to rush around getting everything ready. Even in America, we would consider that to be not rude, but, not as thoughtful as you could be. So, yeah, definitely don't be punctual, but don't come too late either.
Right. And, some of these Mexican traditions I'm not really too clear about because I traveled, I backpacked in Mexico, and I spent some time with some Mexican Americans in Texas. So, of course, we're more middle-class people in those situations. So the rules are somewhat more relaxed. But again, though, if you're eating Mexican food, sometimes you do need to use the tortilla. You cut off pieces of the tortilla and you scoop up food that way. It's actually a fun way to eat, but again, I think the Taiwanese may not be used to that because, as I said before, I could be wrong in this, but my impression is people in Taiwan don't really like to touch their food.
I've never noticed that, but you're married to a Taiwanese woman. Did she actually tell you that?
No, I heard this from other people, other Americans, basically, who've observed that.
Interesting.
But, you can, dispute that amongst yourselves because I know you will eat pizza with your hands.
Right.
So there are exceptions, of course. But there you have it. There are some of the eating customs in different countries around the world. And, of course, there are many other countries with similar and different customs that you should learn about as well. But we don't have time to discuss them here. So that brings us to the end of our lesson. First, we need to hear again from our Chinese teacher.
而在印度的第二个 do 一定要做的事情，就是一定要把你的餐点全部都吃光光，而且要用适当的速度进食，不能太快，也不能太慢哦。注意 pace 指的就是速度的意思，不管是 pace 还是什么样的 speed， 它前面都会搭配介系词的 at。为什么一定要把你的食物全部吃光光呢？因为如果是在印度的话，浪费食物会觉得非常的 discourteous， 非常的不礼貌。我们看一下印度这里第二个 do 的第二句 Wasting food is seen as 这边动词的 see 原本有认为 A 是 B 这样子的用法 see A as B， 那么在这句话当中只是被动 be seen 被认为 as something， 那么这个 be 呢，也就是后面的 as 可能是名词啦，或者是形容词都可以。好，那么在印度，当然我们刚刚一开始已经说了，一定要用右手来吃东西，然后在这边又强调了 don't， 绝对不要用左手来吃东西，因为左手吃东西的话，就是被认为是非常不卫生的 unhygienic。因为他们的左手就是用来清洁啦，或者是擦屁屁用的，所以一定要用右手哦，注意了。好，接下来最后就是墨西哥啦。墨西哥的话呢，则有2个一定要做的事情。第一个，绝对不可以自己开始吃，一定要等主人说请享用才开始吃。第二个呢，很特别，如果是对方找你一起吃饭，一定要让主人付钱哦。因为墨西哥人啊，不会说我们来 go Dutch， 我们来各付各的。我们看到有 pay the bill 跟 split the check， 其实最后面的 check 我们的认知有支票的意思，在这里指的是账单 bill， 所以主人会去买单 pay the bill， 他们通常不会 split 分摊 the bill the check 账单。最后一个注意，不要干什么呢？不要担心准时这件事情。Being punctual, being on time， 不要担心准时是什么意思？难道是可以迟到吗？没错诶，真的可以迟到，因为如果是对方邀请你的话，你差不多其实可以迟到个半个小时都没有关系。所以其实很特别哦，各国的餐桌礼仪啊、生文化啦，其实都是蛮不一样。我们学语言、学文化都很重要。以上是我们今天的内容，我是 Anna， 我们下次见，拜拜。
Well, that's all the time we have left for this unit. We hope you learned a little bit and maybe got you curious to check out some table manners or customs in other countries. Hopefully, we'll get to travel a lot more very soon. For English Digest, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Tom. Goodbye.
Bye.